chapter 5. Decisions is something that every one of us have to do every single minute, right? As a manager, you are deciding whether what person to hire, what vendor to use, what software to use, whether should we build, should we buy, all kinds of decisions. Every single day, we have to make decisions. So this chapter is very important because it gives us a framework on how to think about decision making, because decisions are going to be plenty, and as leaders, decisions are going to be something that you will have to facilitate and also make sometimes for your team. So there's an ideal decision making framework which is broken down in 3 different steps in this chapter. The first step in any decision is free discussion. A discussion that is truly free is where everyone is able to speak their minds. Everyone is able to talk about various pros and cons of a certain decision that we are trying to arrive at. This discussion and decision is effective as much as the employees in your team feel comfortable to freely talk about things. So, the first step in any decision making is a free discussion process. Once that free discussion process takes place, you capture all the pros and cons of various approaches, all the things to take care of. Then you get to a clear decision making step where you can rationalize that these are the terms, these are the basis on which we made the decision. Once that clear decision is made, not everyone in the team will agree to it because some people would have a strong bias towards one decision outcome versus the second. So that's where the third step comes in, wherein even if we not everyone doesn't agree to a decision, they disagree but commit, right? Or there's a full support emotionally as well as in all the action that, hey, as a team, we decide that we want to do this and we're going to do it. So those are the 3 steps. Again, the decisions may not be accurate. So if it's a wrong decision, we again restart the process again with a free discussion. What was it that was missed? And then getting to again a better, clearer decision on certain terms, and then committing again and moving forward. The key step in this is this cycle should continue to go in a time-bound fashion. If it takes forever for decisions to be reached, then you keep discussing, no one makes a decision. That's an important thing for leaders to watch out for. So establishing these key processes will help make sure everyone's included in your decision-making process. You'll often find that people may not speak freely in what's there on their mind because if they're not mature enough, they'll have a fear of being, sounding dumb, or they'll have a fear of being overruled, or they might just not have the self-confidence. So you as leaders have to identify that, coach your team members, but at the same time, you will have to lead by example. You will have to stick your neck out and speak freely on the basis of what you know. If you don't know, you should probably understand the subject matter in a lot of detail and then speak your mind. Do not offend anyone. You can say, hey, I'm biased towards X, or I feel this is a better option. Again, whatever a leader says, the employees in the team will have a huge bias towards it automatically. So you want to be careful. At what point do you speak? At what intensity with which you give your viewpoints is going to be either shutting down the other person because psychologically they might just feel that, hey, that's what my leader is saying, so I'm just going to do that, right? So, but at the same time, people are fearful in sticking their neck out because they just feel either they would be overruled, but they don't realize that no one actually has nothing major bad happens even if your decision is not the right decision, or even if you take a wrong decision, or even if you put a stand towards a point which is not right. But if you keep doing it, your certain times when your input was valuable, it doesn't come out, and then the decision is suboptimal. So empowering yourself with that self-confidence, getting to know the subject, and building that gut feel that every one of us has built over time, and sharing that with the team helps us with effective decision making. So freely speaking your mind is effective and helpful, and empowering yourself as leaders, but also your team members to speak is critical. You'll also realize that only those people who will speak and be passionate in the decision-making process, if they have skin in the game, meaning if the decision doesn't impact them, they'll probably not be that engaged, they'll not contribute or none of that. So skin in the game is basically, the definition here is have a personal investment in organization or undertaking, and therefore a vested interest in its success or the decision, right? Involve only those people in this cycle who actually have skin in the game, and make it very clear who are those people, what are their roles, right? So that comes to this topic of skin in the game, which is like, have only those people who actually have skin in the game in the decision making process to be part of that decision making process. There are some guardrails to think about when you think of decisions, and these are the 6 aspects of effective decisions. Like, what is the decision should be very clear and articulate. Sometimes you don't even know what you're trying to decide. And then the second piece is time bound, or by when should it be decided. If people keep discussing and never reach a conclusion, never commit, never act, then that's not helpful. So the decision that needs to be made should be clear. By when it should be made should be clear. Who is the decider should be made clear as to who is in charge, who is driving it, or who's facilitating it. Again, who should be consulted should be clear, because there may have an impact on those people. Who needs to be informed, because some of these people might not be making the decisions but they will be actually implementing the decisions. In that case, they need to be informed, or some people need to be consulted. And there might be certain leaders who can veto or ratify your decision, so you need to consult them so that their recommendations are part of it. So setting this effective decision making framework, but at the same time using and covering all of your bases so that your decision is effective, is quite important. And so a rapid framework, which we use heavily at LinkedIn, is very important to use as decision making. So there are roles for every people, right? There's a decider who decides as to what the organization is going to commit. But then the first step is someone recommends, saying, hey, we need a decision or an action here, right? But before that, there's input, there's gathering of information as to, hey, what are the views, what are the possible outcomes, and those people their inputs may be used, may not be used fully, but you have to consult, right? And then there are certain people who will actually do the work. So those people have to be accountable for the action, so they have to be consulted and they have to perform the action, so they should be part of the decision making process. So the RAPID, so RAPID, P is for perform, A is agree. These people can veto and say, hey, I don't agree or disagree, right? So they have to agree to the decision making process. This could be your boss, right? And then the decision could be you as Inch leader who's saying, hey, I'm deciding that we're going to do this, right? Based on the recommendation that comes from, let's say, a senior engineer in your team. So your boss needs to agree. The person who's actually going to do the work should be in the loop and assigned, and should be in the process of decision. Various stakeholders who are impacted or whose input is important should be consulted. And then a recommender who has skin in the game should be part of that, right? So all of these people should have skin in the game. And that's where, if you have a framework like a rapid framework like this one, where R is recommend, A is agree, P is perform, I is input, and D is decide, then you have the right roles for different people as to who's going to make the decision, how is the decision actually going to happen, and that the decision actually will be implemented, right? So if you cover all of these people by asking these questions and using some sort of a framework in your team, then everyone in your team has good, effective decision-making process, and there's no conflict. So it's pretty critical as leaders to have such frameworks in place so that decisions are made quickly, because we have to make effective decisions, that everyone's included in the decision-making process. It doesn't take too long for making decisions. And remember, as technically good you were when you were a software engineer or when you were a frontline engineer, you were really good. But as your maturity grows up in the business understanding, your technical understanding may not be as good as the frontline engineer, because they are doing it all the time. So technically, a manager gets a little more obsolete every day. And so they do have position power, but the technical know-how power is more vested on the senior individual engineers in the team. So this point is pretty important for the manager to be aware of, because they represent the business aspect much more strongly. They have the learnings, the past experiences on what works, what doesn't work. So the position power is very important from a business perspective. But at the same time, knowing that you need to mix the knowledge power, which are certain people who know the technical know-how, which is also rapidly changing. The software industry is changing so rapidly, so is every other industry being disrupted. So the art of mixing the knowledge power folks who are senior individual contributors with the position power folks who understand the business and the customer needs, which is also ever changing, that together meshing is the role of senior managers and senior leaders who can bring this together. So if you have this insight and if you have a framework like this to make effective decisions, and you're covering all your base by asking the key questions and making sure people have skin in the game, are speaking freely, and you're using a consistent process throughout, then you're bound to make effective decisions. So remember, this is the last point. There is a strong temptation for each one of us as leaders to make decisions, just move on and not have to go through this onerous process of discussion and our agreement and consensus and all of that. But remember, that's important, because as leader, you can make a decision, but it feels like an order if it's not going through the process. So you don't want to make orders, because people will not be as engaged. They'll not feel that they're part of the process. They'll not feel it's their decision. So this process is important. And at the same time, remember that decisions are, if someone's really on one side of the decision, the other side of the decision was taken, it takes time for people. So remember that they need time to adjust, rationalize, disagree, but yet commit. But emotionally, it takes time. So give them the time to put their heads back together, reconvene, adjourn after some point, and then come back. So that is important, and that's the last point. Homework. A lot of decisions are pending for each one of us, right? Do not procrastinate. Use a framework like this. Empower your team members. Take a few decisions and use the 6-question approach to figure out who, what, when, right? And all the parts that we discussed so far. Establish a process like the RAPID that I discussed in this video, so that everyone can make effective decisions fast. And if you think that decisions are not made timely, then there should be some sort of a clean escalation process where you quickly escalate in a time-bound fashion, something like a 5-day alignment or something, to say, hey, we disagree, we can't get to a consensus, let's escalate to our senior people. Again, do not shy away from decisions. Hopefully this video and this chapter gives us a huge leg up in terms of a framework, and also making sure that we can make effective decisions. Thanks.